Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Noah Van Sciver's One Dirty Tree, put out by Uncivilized Books. Thank you so much to Tom Kaczynski at Uncivilized Books for sending a big old care package. He got it to me like right in time for my Christmas break. So I've been going through all of these awesome books that Tom sent over and just enjoying reading. So taking a look at Noah's book here. I haven't read much of Noah Van Sciver's work. I tried to read Fante Bukowski, and it was so much just about a writer that I felt like it might as well have been an autobiography. And I think a lot of his work is all the stuff I've seen, including this book, is pretty autobiographical, which is not something that I seek out. I just don't seek out autobiography comics unless it looks like it's going to be a really strange one. So, anyways, this is an interesting read going into it because it's like outside of what I would normally go for. Really like that it starts with an Aristotle quote, and I think this sets the tenor for what the book is about. It says, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you a man." So this is definitely a coming of age story of a sort, but it's also it's another one of these more kaleidoscopic things, and I'm having to adjust to that. But the more I think about it, the more interesting it is. These more like scattered stories. I'm so bound to this idea of like, what's the story? What's it about? What point are you trying to make? And I think I need to break out of that a little bit. I think a book like this is more about putting together a kaleidoscope of memories and kind of interrelated things because life isn't so linear. And so I think Noah Van Sciver's trying to show there's kind of complex interactions between memory and the past and the future and where you're at now and how things affect you. But I'm just not sure by the end of it. I don't know. It's hard when you're doing that kind of storytelling to come away with like I don't know how to assess that kind of thing quite yet. So the best I could think is just point out some moments that I found interesting and point out some moments that I found were not so interesting to me in the book, because that's kind of how I have to approach it. Is this is like some scattered memories from one guy, and I don't feel like I can look for some big life lesson in there so much as just find these things that resonate with me or in positive or negative and react to them. So right out the gate, you get an explanation of why it's called One Dirty Tree. I like that. There's been a couple books I've read lately where the title makes no sense to me. I'm not huge on titles, but I like that he said that they lived at 133, and that was the address of their house that he grew up in. And his older brothers, just renamed it One Dirty Tree. The book is interesting. I think part of what was difficult for me with this book is I felt like there was 3 different books in here. There's one book that's about Noah Van Sciver becoming a cartoonist. There's another book that's about growing up in a Mormon household, and then there's a book about relationship into his 30s, and there's kind of an extra story like about making this book. But those are kind of the 3 primary stories, and each one could be really interesting if it was the only story, I think, but then it would be a more linear path, and I don't know that that's what Van Sciver wanted to do. One of the things that would make his autobiography of becoming a cartoonist focused just on that particularly interesting is that his brother is Ethan Van Sciver, who did his self-published Sciver Frog. So that's Noah showing Ethan working on that, his original 4-issue miniseries or whatever that came out in the 90s that was self-published. And then he went on to be a big-time DC megastar artist, and then now has made boatloads of money crowdfunding Sciver Frog online. When I was working with Dave, me and Dave had talked to Ethan because Dave was going to be writing some Sciver Frog for a while. I know Ethan was a controversial figure at about the time this book was released in 2018 with the Comicsgate, but he treated he treated me great. Spent a lot of time talking on the phone to me and stuff. That would have been compelling on its own, just because you have these 2 brothers who love comics so much. But unlike the Los Bros Hernandez or other kind of siblings that grow up doing comics, the Tomer and Asaf Hanukkah, just people I can think of, Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon, that really collaborate. Like Noah's doing Fantagraphics books and Ethan's drawing Sciver Frog and like Green Lantern. And that's really interesting that they split into such different realms of the comic world. And I think that's a peculiar and unique enough story that I would really like to read an autobiography about that. There would be something illuminating in there. And throughout this book, Ethan's always presented as pretty kind and supportive. And even in the back, Noah says, thanks for the support. So it'd be really cool to get those two brothers who love the same medium. But like, I've talked to Ethan, and I know like he thinks about comics as hamburgers, and he wants to have Burger King. And because like, I'm trying to sell burgers here. Let's make cheap, greasy, like fun to eat burgers. And Noah's most definitely on the like artisanal side of things. And so a conversation between them in a comic, or a collaboration with their two like wildly different styles, I think that would be a hell of a book. That seems like wildly interesting to me. But this book is not that. It kind of just gives a hint of that, and it shows them reading comics and talking about their favorite comics. Obviously, Ethan and their other older brother really like the superhero stuff, whereas Noah's more like reading Milk and Cheese and Ren and Stimpy and Bone. And it's cool, you get some actual inserts of old comic drawings from them. So I really like that. Like, if you're gonna go into your history as an artist, like, show some of the old art. That's a lot of fun. Like, I have a lot of that old stuff, and I really like looking at it. It reminds me, this part of it reminds me of Jimmy Gownley's The Worst Idea Ever, where is not really complaining about being a comic artist. It's like the fun part of becoming the artist in the beginning. Other parts of this book, you more have like Noah sitting around being like, oh, it's so hard to be a comic artist. Another thing that he does is like, there will be these moments where characters are like, a character in the book is drawing another character. This is him drawing his girlfriend at the time, who he's going to, spoiler alert, break up with by the end of the book. Not for any reason related to his upbringing, though, which is a strange part to me. But here you get a more realistic drawing of her, and then you have a drawing of Jurassic Park, and that segues into the next piece there, because there's kind of all these little short stories. Here you have Noah with his girlfriend just at like a party with a friend, having lunch with one of her friends, and she's explaining to her friend that her boyfriend's a cartoonist, and it's like, oh, you do animations or TV shows? Cool. And it's like, no, I draw comics, but usually about life and stuff like that. And he just draws himself becoming uglier and uglier. So there you get that like devalued self-worth of a cartoonist, and I'm just so sick of seeing that in comics. Like, I don't know, man, as we push comics into like trying to be more serious and literary, why do we just keep celebrating what ugly slobs we are who never get out of our room? And like, if you're an ugly slob who never gets out of your room, like, is your life really interesting enough to make books about it? Like, that's where I fall off with a lot of the diary comic stuff, is like, you're selling these books to other people who already like comic books. These books aren't going out and grabbing non-comic audience readers, I would imagine, for the most part. And if they were, then you're presenting them with a picture, like you're presenting them there with their preloaded bias anyways, and so you're just reinforcing that, and they're very unlikely to come back. So you're either talking to a bunch of people that are already living this and don't need to be reminded about it, or have different experiences of it. But we're all cartoonists and fans of comics. Like, I don't know how much more time we need to spend talking about being cartoonists and fans of comics. But then people who are outside that loop, I just can't imagine this landing with them at all. So those parts of this, the more modern day stuff, is like, it's the same thing right here. A day in the life of the American cartoonist. I go work at Panera. I come home. I fuck around on social media, and then I draw. And it's like, I don't know, man. That's like what everyone's doing. I don't know why that's an interesting two-page spread to people. Obviously, a bunch of people like Noah Van Sciver's work. I really like certain parts of it. A lot of people like diary comics and autobio comics. It's just a really hard genre for me, especially because so much of them are committing this same sin of just like, let me show you sitting around, what it's like to sit around and draw all day. I've seen that too many times. It's just not interesting. Now, he's making it a little bit more compelling by linking his current relationship to what's going on in the past, and there's an interesting image in there by his mom, which we'll look at. And so you get some of these resonances from his past to his future, but they're pretty loose throughout this book. Like I said, to me, they're kind of three very, very loosely related stories, and that structure of the book is interesting to me, but some of the parts I have a really hard time with. And then here he's at Panera at work, and he's telling his boss like, oh, this is awesome, like, I just got my book Fante Bukowski he's talking about is going to be published by Fantagraphics. It's like Fantagraphics. That's for someone like this. Fantagraphics is the place that we all want to be at, right? That's like the best cartoonists in the world. That's how we've all grown up thinking of Fantagraphics, and so it's like that's a huge deal for a cartoonist like Noah Van Sciver. And his boss is like, yeah, whatever. No, go clean the bathrooms and take out the trash. And that's just the life of an artist. Like that's very real. Though that seems more interesting to me than like what an artist does when they're in their studio, because that's like some of the harsh reality of it that the kids need to know about. That like, look, you can be working at Michael's and then you can get flown out to give a lecture and all expenses paid to England, and then Tuesday you're back at Michael's working. I lived those experiences. I still have those experiences. I have like one full-time job and two part-time jobs that add up to another full-time job, and the YouTube side hustle, and then trying to find drawing for all of that. Like that's the real life of any artist, not just a cartoonist. So that's some real harsh truths being dropped there. Here's another good example of why I have such a hard time with the diary comics. In diary comics, you're inevitably going to be talking about the people around you. Like you're just making comics about your life. So anyone who comes into your life then is fodder. And that just feels gross and icky to me. And then here he's wandering around saying, what am I doing? I'll be 30 years old tomorrow. I should turn some things around. I have to face the fact that my relationship with Gwen is doomed. There's no future for us. Not if I want to continue drawing comics. Come on, Noah. She would prefer if you were an electrician over a cartoonist. And like that kind of just putting your own romantic partner at the time on blast publicly. I know he's going to break up with her by the end of the book, but like this is still a real person. I'm just very uncomfortable with people putting that much of their life out on the stage. I actually have some more complex further thoughts about that, an autobiography that I really want to get into with Sean. We'll talk about Gabriel Bell's work, which Tom also sent over. And Gabriel Bell's work, I'll admit, is one of the hardest bodies of work for me to consume because it's so much of this kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But in reading this and in reading that and some other things I've been thinking about, I am reconsidering autobiography and diary comics, and that's just a longer discussion that I'll need to get into with someone else. So look forward to that discussion between me and Sean about Gabriel Bell's work. Here, I really, really, really like this image here, this one-off image here, the way he represents that they're breaking up. Like we're going back to this scene now where he's been made to feel like a monster by being outed as a cartoonist, and then they get in an argument here, and like there's the rift. Like that's the moment where they know it's over. And I like that Noah obviously painted this all on a single piece of paper and then ripped it in half and then scanned it ripped like that. Seeing that deckled torn edge is really nice, and it's just a really like visceral, impactful moment. So it's moments like this that like propel me through, even though the autobiography aspect or the autobiography of the cartoonist aspects of it are just a barrier for me. And then you get this here, which is resonant of him drawing Gwen. Now you have his mom drawing a portrait of him drawing a portrait of one of the other siblings. And you can see that his mom could really, really draw as well. So that's the third part, and I haven't really touched on it, but that's the third book that's in here that could have been a really interesting book on his own. Is they grew up in a Mormon household, but with parents who are kind of hippies. Like dad has long hair, and the church doesn't like that. Dad's kind of a slacker. Mom and dad are both artistic. Mom can obviously draw like really classically well. That's a beautiful drawing there. It almost has like a Da Vinci or pre-Raphaelite kind of neo-Raphaelite quality to it. That's really beautiful. So that, like the experience of growing up in a Mormon household with, I don't know, he had, let's see, I skipped over that page. I mean, 9 siblings, it looks like. Yeah, 9 siblings, Ethan being the second oldest. That's like an interesting upbringing there. And he goes into like the beliefs of Mormonism for like half of a page, which, 2 pages spent on the life of a cartoonist and half a page on the beliefs of Mormonism. It's like, I would be really interested in that as just its own book, The Life of a Mormon. But to him, it seems so just kind of like incidental. It's more about growing up poor and that kind of thing. And so that just gets skipped over. But to me, like the two brothers that both become artists or the growing up Mormon, those are the two really compelling stories that are in here. Here again, you get him talking about Ethan drawing his comics. And I love this, that they're just like, he's saying words are very unnecessary. That's a song they're listening to. But also,